Hey everyone, and a special welcome to all you future safety pros out there. Have you ever stopped to think if there's like a single game plan that works everywhere? Whether you're on a massive construction site or in a quiet tech office, to make it as safe as humanly possible? Well, guess what? There is. And today we are going to pull back the curtain on it. We're talking about ISO 45001. This is the global blueprint for workplace health and safety. So, yep, let's dive right in. Okay, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of the standard, I want to start with a more fundamental question. Think about it. We all know what looks safe, right? You see the hard hats, the bright yellow warning signs, all the usual stuff. But what's the real difference between a workplace that just looks safe on the surface and one that actually feels safe deep down? It really comes down to building a genuine culture of safety. It's so much more than just ticking boxes on a checklist. And that idea, that's what we're really going to unpack today. So here's a quick look at our game plan. First, we'll hit the why this thing even exists. Then we'll get into the what it actually is. After that, we'll look at the how it's designed to keep making things safer. We'll even look at some key tools you're definitely going to use in your career. And finally, we'll tie it all together and talk about why this stuff really, really matters for you. All right, let's kick things off with a big question, the why behind the whole thing. Why do we even need a standard like ISO 45001? Well, it all boils down to one single fundamental responsibility. And here it is. This quote, "This is the bedrock of the entire standard." And I want you to zero in on one key phrase here, physical and mental health. See, this isn't just about preventing the obvious stuff, slips, trips, and falls. The standard makes it crystal clear that an organization is also on the hook for workers' psychological well-being. That is a massive and pretty modern way of thinking about safety. It makes the whole approach truly holistic. Okay, so if that's the core responsibility, protecting both physical and mental health, how does a company actually do that? I mean, where do you even start? Well, that's where the blueprint comes in. This next part is all about answering the question, what exactly is ISO 45001? At its core, ISO 45001 is basically the instruction manual for building something called an Occupational Health and Safety Management System, or OHS for short. The best way to think about it is like a recipe for a really complex dish, or maybe a coach's game plan for a championship. It's not just a bunch of random safety rules thrown together. Nope. It's a highly structured, systematic approach for a company to manage all of its safety efforts and actually hit its safety goals. And this is where you see a huge shift in mindset. The whole point is to move away from being reactive, waiting for an accident to happen and then calling for help. Instead, the goal is to be completely proactive, to see the danger coming and put up a shield before it hits. It's all about designing a system that's smart enough to anticipate and manage risks, basically stopping injuries before they even have a chance to happen. Right, so a system like this can't just be a dusty binder on a shelf. It has to be a living, breathing thing that can adapt and change. So the big question is, how does this OHS management system actually work? And more importantly, how does it get better over time? Well, let's pop the hood and look at the engine that makes it all run. Whoa, okay, I know this looks like a lot, but don't get overwhelmed by all the text here. Just focus your eyes on that cycle right in the middle, that circle. That is the engine of the entire system. It's called the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, or PDCA for short. And it's this really simple but incredibly powerful loop that just keeps pushing a company to get better and better at safety. Let's break that cycle down. It's super intuitive. First, you plan. You ask, what are our safety goals? What do we need to do to get there? Simple enough. Then you do. You actually implement those processes you just planned. After that comes check. This is where you step back and ask, is this stuff actually working? You monitor everything and measure your performance. And finally, you act. Based on everything you just learned from the check phase, you make changes to improve the whole system. And then the cycle begins all over again. It's just this constant, relentless drive to improve. Okay, so that's the big picture theory, the engine of the system. But what does this look like on the ground, in the real world? The standard basically gives us an entire toolkit of practical things to use. But for now, we're going to focus on two absolutely essential tools that you will, without a doubt, be using every single day in your OHS career. Tool number one is something called proactive hazard identification. And the keyword here is proactive. This is not a one-and-done thing. It's a constant, ongoing process. A huge part of your job as an OHS professional is to always be scanning, looking at the workplace, the way people do things, the equipment, searching for potential sources of harm before they turn into an actual incident. So you found a hazard. Now what? What do you actually do about it? Well, that brings us to tool number 2, and honestly, this might be the most important concept you'll learn: the hierarchy of controls. Think of this as your strategic playbook for figuring out the absolute best and most effective way to get rid of a risk, or at least reduce it. And here is that playbook. See how it's an inverted pyramid? That's on purpose. It's designed to show you that you should always start at the top, with the most powerful solutions. The absolute best thing you can do is elimination. Just physically remove the hazard. Gone. If you can't do that, you move down to substitution. Can you replace the hazard with something safer? Then you work your way down through engineering controls, which isolate people from the hazard. Then administrative controls, which change how people work. And all the way at the bottom, as the very last line of defense, is PPE, or personal protective equipment. The analogy is perfect. It's always, always better to just get rid of a noisy machine than it is to just hand out earplugs to everyone. All right, we've covered the why, the what, and the how. So let's bring this all home. Let's talk about you. Why is getting a real grip on this standard going to give you a massive leg up in your career? Here's the thing. A truly great safety system isn't built out of paperwork and procedures. It's built by people. Look at these factors for success. It takes everybody, from the CEO in the corner office right down to the person on the shop floor. Everyone has to be committed and involved. And when you can walk into a job interview and explain that, you're showing them you get it. You understand that safety isn't just a department's job, it's a value that everyone in the company has to share. And honestly, that is the biggest takeaway I want you to have today. Getting ISO 45001 isn't about memorizing a bunch of clauses from a document. It's about learning to speak the language of leadership when it comes to safety. It gives you the framework and the credibility to talk to management, to help build that safety culture we talked about, and to lead the kind of projects that genuinely protect people from harm. So I want to leave you with one final thought. The world of work is changing, and it's changing fast. We've got AI, a huge shift to remote work, all sorts of new technologies popping up. So as you head out into your careers, you have to keep asking, what's the next big challenge for us OHS pros? And how are we going to take these fundamental principles we've talked about and apply them to the workplace of tomorrow? That's the big question. And now you're the ones who are equipped to start finding the answers.